Are you going soft on me, Mark? I teased, barely stifling a laugh. We were sitting at the dinner table, and I could see his fork freeze mid-air. For a split second, I thought he was going to snap back, but instead, he just chuckled. It was one of those chuckles that didn't reach his eyes, and there it was, a flicker of hurt. I knew that look too well. Oops, maybe I pushed it too far. To smooth things over, I quickly suggested, why don't you invite your college buddies over for a barbecue this weekend? It's been ages since you all hung out. He looked skeptical at first, but then his face softened. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, he said, reaching for his phone to send out a few texts. Saturday rolled around, and our backyard was buzzing with laughter and the smell of grilling meat. Mark's friends showed up in droves, and he was suddenly the life of the party. Seeing him so animated and confident, I almost forgot my little dig at dinner. Then there was Jason. Oh, Jason. He sauntered over with a beer in hand, and we started chatting. He had this charm about him, effortless and magnetic. I found myself leaning in, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. It was exciting. But then, Jason had to go and ruin it. He made a casual, offhand comment about Mark's softness, echoing my own words from the other night. I watched the color drain from Mark's face. He clammed up, retreating into himself right there in front of everyone. Damn it, Jason, read the room. Jason must have noticed the awkward silence he caused because he immediately apologized. Too late, buddy. The damage was done. Mark muttered something about being tired and headed inside, leaving me to entertain his friends. Great. Now I was stuck with a bunch of half-drunk men who probably thought I was the world's biggest jerk. I kept the party going as best I could, but my mind was with Mark, brooding somewhere in the house. When the last guest finally left, I trudged upstairs and found Mark sitting in the dark, staring at the wall. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Mark, are you okay? I asked, but he just grunted something unintelligible. I climbed into bed next to him, feeling a heavy sense of unease settling in. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it better, but the words wouldn't come. So, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a simple joke had spiraled into this mess. Sleep didn't come easy that night. My mind raced with what-ifs and maybes. What if I hadn't teased him? What if I hadn't encouraged the barbecue? And why did Jason's words sting so much more coming from him? Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off with a silent vow to fix things. Tomorrow, I'd make it right. Somehow. Why don't you go on a weekend trip with your friends? I blurted out over breakfast, watching Mark push his scrambled eggs around his plate. His reluctance was palpable, like he didn't want to leave the comfort of our quiet, predictable life. But after a bit of cajoling, he finally agreed. Maybe a break would do us both good. He could use some bro time, and I could. Well, I could use some alone time to think. Or not think. Yeah, not thinking sounded great. When Mark left for his trip, the house felt weirdly empty. Like, really empty. The kind of quiet that makes you hear every creak and groan in the house and wonder if you're starring in your own horror movie. With Mark gone, I had all this free time to myself for the first time in forever. And what did I do with it? I texted Jason, because apparently, I'm a glutton for complicated situations. Thanks for coming to the barbecue. Sorry about the awkward moment with Mark, I typed, my thumb hovering over the send button. Screw it, sent. Jason replied almost instantly, no big deal. These things happen. He had a way of brushing things off that made you feel like nothing was ever truly a problem. We kept texting, and before I knew it, the conversation had veered into dangerous territory. Flirty territory. It felt exhilarating, and a bit terrifying. Over the next few days, Jason and I texted non-stop. His messages were witty, his compliments sly but sweet. He made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, a thrill that was intoxicating and scary all at once. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't seem to stop. Then came the inevitable suggestion. How about we meet for coffee? My heart raced as I typed my response. Sure, sounds good, because, of course, I couldn't resist. We met at a little cafe tucked away from prying eyes. The moment I saw him, my nerves kicked into overdrive, but his smile melted them away. We talked for hours, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. It was like finding an oasis in the middle of a desert. Our coffee date turned into an intimate conversation, the kind where you forget about time and place. Jason confessed that he'd always found me attractive, and I blushed like a teenager. His words made me feel desirable, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a heady feeling. As we walked out of the cafe, Jason leaned in and kissed me. It was brief, electric, and left me wanting more. I pulled back, breathless, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. What the hell was I doing? This was dangerous, but damn, it felt good. I drove home with my head in the clouds, a stupid grin plastered on my face. The thrill of the kiss lingered, but so did the guilt. I knew I was crossing lines, stepping into territory that could blow up my whole life. But for now, all I could think about was the next time I'd see Jason. Mark's trip felt like a ticking clock, counting down to when I'd have to face reality again. But until then, I was going to ride this wave of excitement, consequences be damned. Hey, babe, just checking in. How's everything going? Mark's voice crackled through the phone, and I felt a pang of guilt. There he was, genuinely caring, and here I was, knee-deep in a scandalous affair. I quickly brushed it aside, focusing instead on the lingering excitement from my last encounter with Jason. Everything's fine, just enjoying some quiet time, I lied smoothly, the thrill of deceit tingling my spine. The secret rendezvous with Jason continued, each meeting more exhilarating and risky than the last. We'd meet at hotels, always careful to avoid being seen. It was like living in a spy movie, and I was the femme fatale. Jason was adventurous and daring, qualities that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. Each encounter was a new escapade, a new high. When Mark returned from his trip, he was a changed man, relaxed and happier. It was a relief to see him like that, but it also made my double life even more complicated. I tried my best to act normal, masking the guilt with a practiced smile. He had no idea what was really going on, and I intended to keep it that way. Jason, meanwhile, began showering me with gifts. Flowers would arrive at my office, jewelry hidden in my purse, and even lingerie slipped discreetly into my drawer. Each present was a thrill, but also a reminder of the dangerous game I was playing. I hid them carefully, always on edge, always paranoid that Mark might stumble upon them. Then came the invitation to an exclusive party. Jason promised it would be an experience like no other, and he wasn't kidding. The crowd was wild and extravagant, a far cry from my usual social circles. The opulence was intoxicating, the anonymity liberating. For a few hours, I was someone else entirely. But the illusion shattered when I ran into an old acquaintance. She eyed me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone dripping with innuendo. I played it cool, feigning nonchalance. "Oh, just exploring new places," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. The rest of the evening was a blur of paranoia and excitement. Every glance felt like an accusation, every laugh like a whisper about me. By the time I got home, I was a wreck, but also strangely exhilarated. The danger added a new layer to the thrill, making me crave it even more. In the quiet of my bedroom, I lay awake, replaying the events of the night. The guilt and excitement warred within me, each fueling the other. I was in too deep, but the idea of stopping felt impossible. The affair had taken on a life of its own, and I was just along for the ride, consequences be damned. "You've been acting different lately," Mark said, casually flipping through his phone as we sat on the couch. His words were a punch to the gut, but I masked my reaction with a practiced yawn. "Work's been crazy," I replied, feigning exhaustion. "Deadlines are killing me." But Mark wasn't buying it. His suspicion grew by the day. I noticed him glancing at my phone more often, his curiosity barely masked. Good thing I had anticipated this. Jason's messages were tucked away in a hidden app, my secret world just a swipe away. Jason, ever the thrill seeker, suggested we take a short trip together, away from the city's prying eyes. "Let's escape to a cabin in the woods," he proposed. The idea was tempting. A secluded getaway sounded perfect. I agreed, eager to escape the growing tension at home. The cabin was a slice of paradise. Nestled deep in the woods, it felt like our own little world. The isolation heightened our passion, every touch and whisper amplified by the silence around us. Yet, despite the bliss, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to move just beyond my vision, an unsettling presence I couldn't ignore. One night, I caught a glimpse of someone, or something, lurking outside the cabin. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Jason, my heart racing. He laughed it off, pulling me close. "It's just your imagination," he said, but his reassurances did little to calm my nerves. Sleep was a distant dream that night, every creak and rustle sending chills down my spine. Returning home, Mark confronted me about my absences. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his eyes searching mine for the truth. I lied smoothly, saying I'd been visiting an old friend who needed support. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push further either. Not yet. Mark's suspicion was now a constant shadow. He began following me discreetly, his attempts to catch me in a lie becoming more desperate. I could feel his eyes on me, the tension between us thickening with each passing day. It was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. The thrill, the danger, it was a drug I couldn't quit. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone buzzed with a message from Jason. "I miss you," it read, simple yet charged with meaning. I typed a quick reply, my heart racing. The door creaked open, and Mark stepped in, his eyes narrowing as he saw me hastily shove my phone away. "What are you hiding?" he asked, his voice a low growl. I felt the walls closing in, my carefully constructed lies teetering on the brink of collapse. "Nothing," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would come crashing down, and with it, the fragile balance of my double life. As I lay in bed that night, Mark's even breathing beside me, my mind raced with the possibilities. How long could I keep this up? The lies, the deception, it was all spiraling out of control. But the thought of losing Jason, of losing the thrill and excitement he brought into my life, was unbearable. I was trapped in a web of my own making, the strands tightening with every lie. And yet, despite the looming consequences, I couldn't bring myself to let go. The affair had become an addiction, a dark and dangerous path I was compelled to follow, even as it led me closer to the edge of ruin. There's nothing like the thrill of a new location to spice things up, especially when you're living a double life. Jason and I decided to meet in a small town several hours away. It was the perfect getaway, remote enough to be safe, but not too far to be suspicious. The secrecy added a tantalizing edge to our affair, making every touch, every whispered word, feel forbidden and intense. We chose a quaint little bed and breakfast as our rendezvous point. It was all very picturesque, almost like a scene from a romantic movie. Except this wasn't some sappy love story, it was a high-stakes game with real consequences. We were careful, always looking over our shoulders, but that just made it even more exhilarating. One day, during one of our secret escapades, Jason introduced me to his business partner, Alex. The moment I shook Alex's hand, I felt a chill. He was charming, sure, but there was something off about him, a sinister edge lurking behind his polite smile. My instincts screamed at me to be cautious. Alex invited us to a private event at a lavish mansion. It sounded like a dream, but I had a nagging feeling in my gut. The guests were influential, and the atmosphere buzzed with illicit activities. The whole place was dripping with opulence and danger, a heady mix that made my heart race. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Alex's gaze followed me everywhere, his eyes sharp and calculating. I tried to ignore it, but the intensity of his scrutiny unnerved me. It was like he knew something, something that could unravel everything. Eventually, I found myself alone with Alex. My heart pounded as he cornered me in a quiet room. "You know, I'm aware of your little affair with Jason," he said, his voice smooth as silk. Panic surged through me. How much did he know? What did he want? Alex hinted at using his knowledge to his advantage, making it clear he had no qualms about exploiting our secret. I felt trapped, the walls closing in around me. Desperate, I sought out Jason. When I told him what happened, he tried to reassure me. "Alex is just trying to intimidate you," he said. "I'll handle it." But his words did little to calm my nerves. Returning home, I was more cautious than ever. Every sound made me jump, every shadow felt like a threat. Mark seemed distant, and I couldn't tell if it was because of his own suspicions or if he was just preoccupied. Either way, it made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. My paranoia grew with each passing day. Every time Mark looked at me, I wondered if he knew. Did he suspect something? Was he onto me? The tension was suffocating, and I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, one misstep away from disaster. I had to be more careful, more vigilant. But the harder I tried to maintain control, the more it seemed to slip through my fingers. The thrill of the affair, the danger of being caught, it all became too much. I was living on a knife's edge, and it was only a matter of time before I fell. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized that my life had become a labyrinth of lies and deceit. There was no easy way out, no simple solution. The unraveling had begun, and I was powerless to stop it. All I could do was brace myself for the inevitable fallout, hoping that somehow, I could navigate the chaos and emerge unscathed. If I thought things were tense before, I had no idea what was coming next. Mark's behavior had taken a turn for the bizarre. He'd disappear for hours without any explanation, then return home with the vaguest of excuses. It didn't take a genius to figure out he was investigating me, trying to catch me in my web of lies. Paranoia, thy name is Mark. One afternoon, I walked into the house, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Mark had clearly been through my things. Clothes were strewn about, drawers half opened. It was like a tornado had ripped through my personal space. He was waiting for me in the living room, a grim look on his face. In his hand, he held some of the gifts Jason had given me, a necklace, a pair of earrings, and a silk scarf. Care to explain these? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. I scrambled for an explanation, the lie forming even as I opened my mouth. Oh, those? They're from a secret admirer at work. I didn't mention them because, well, it seemed harmless and a bit embarrassing. I tried to sound nonchalant, but the look on Mark's face told me he wasn't buying it. Still, he didn't press further. Not then, anyway. Meanwhile, Jason was losing his cool over Alex's threats. We need to lay low for a while, he suggested during one of our tense phone calls. But I wasn't ready to give up our secret meetings. The affair had become my escape, my drug, and I was hopelessly addicted. Mark's surveillance efforts became more intense. One day, I discovered a tracking app installed on my phone. Nice try, Sherlock. I deleted it immediately, feeling a mix of anger and fear. This was getting out of hand. Desperate to maintain contact with Jason, I resorted to using a burner phone. It was risky, but the thrill of it all outweighed the danger. Or so I thought. Then came the day when my carefully constructed facade came crashing down. Mark confronted me, holding a stack of photos and printed messages. Irrefutable evidence of my affair with Jason. I felt the blood drain from my face. My legs wobbled, and I had to sit down. It's over, he said, his voice breaking. I know everything. The reality of my double life crumbling hit me like a freight train. All the lies, the deceit, the thrill, it all came crashing down in a spectacular fashion. I broke down, tears streaming down my face. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. Mark had all the cards, and I was left with nothing but the ruins of my secret life. In that moment, I realized just how much I had lost. The excitement and passion of the affair had blinded me to the reality of what I was risking. And now, there was no going back. My marriage, my stability, everything was hanging by a thread. As Mark stood there, waiting for some kind of explanation, all I could think was, what have I done? The fallout was going to be brutal. There was no escaping the mess I had created. But maybe, just maybe, there was a sliver of hope left. A chance to salvage something from the wreckage. As I sat there, shattered and exposed, I knew I had to face the consequences of my actions. The question was, would I survive it? That's it, I want a separation. Mark's words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, ready to drop. He didn't shout, didn't even raise his voice, but the finality of his statement cut deeper than any yell could have. He packed a bag and left, slamming the door behind him. And just like that, I was alone, left to deal with the wreckage of our marriage and the mess of my affair. Jason tried to console me, bless his heart, but the pressure of the situation was turning our once thrilling affair into a strained, tense relationship. The weight of what we'd done, and the fallout it caused, was suffocating. Every time he touched me, I felt a pang of guilt, a reminder of the chaos I had unleashed. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Alex reappeared. He sauntered into my life with that same sinister edge, demanding favors in exchange for his silence. He had me cornered, and he knew it. The feeling of being trapped was overwhelming. I was caught in a web of my own making, with no clear way out. I sought legal advice, preparing for the inevitable divorce and trying to figure out how to handle Alex's looming threats. The lawyer was sympathetic but blunt. The legalities of my situation were complicated, and Alex's blackmail only added to the mess. My head spun with the possibilities, each one worse than the last. Mark's friends started reaching out. Some offered support, but many just wanted to express their disappointment. It was humiliating, having my private sins laid bare for all to see. I felt like a pariah, a modern-day Hester Prynne, but instead of a scarlet letter, I had whispers and judgment trailing behind me. Then the anonymous messages started. Texts, emails, even handwritten notes slipped under my door. They were likely from Alex, little reminders of his power over me. Each one was a chilling reminder that my secrets were not as buried as I'd hoped. The fear gnawed at me, day and night. Desperate, I considered going to the police. But the thought of the scandal, the media frenzy, the public shaming, was too much to bear. And deep down, I still clung to a sliver of hope that Mark and I could somehow find our way back to each other. Going to the police would shatter that hope completely. Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. My nerves were frayed, my mind constantly racing. The house felt emptier without Mark, a hollow echo of what it once was. I moved through my days like a ghost, haunted by the choices that had led me here. One evening, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked worn, tired, defeated. Where was the confident, carefree person I used to be? Gone. Replaced by someone who had let excitement and desire cloud her judgment. I knew I had to make a decision, take control of the situation before it consumed me entirely. But the path forward was murky, fraught with danger and uncertainty. Could I face Alex's threats head-on? Could I find a way to salvage what was left of my life? Or was I destined to be trapped in this nightmare of my own making? With a deep breath, I turned away from the mirror. I had to find a way out, for my sake and for the chance, however slim, of rebuilding something from the ashes of my past mistakes. The road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to navigate it, one step at a time. "You're not going to like this, but I have a plan," Jason said, his voice low and serious. My heart sank. In my experience, the words, "I have a plan," usually preceded something disastrous. I crossed my arms and gave him a skeptical look. "Oh, really? And what brilliant scheme have you cooked up this time?" Jason explained his idea. Confront Alex head-on, force him to back off by threatening to expose him. He assured me it would work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to end badly. Desperate times, desperate measures, I suppose. We set up a meeting with Alex at a busy cafe, hoping the public setting would keep things civil. The cafe was bustling with people, perfect for our purposes. As I sat there, waiting for Alex to arrive, my nerves were on edge. Jason squeezed my hand under the table, but it did little to calm me. Alex walked in, looking every bit the smug bastard I'd come to loathe. He sat down with a smirk, his eyes darting between Jason and me. The initial exchange was tense but controlled. Then Alex, always the opportunist, produced a folder from his briefcase. He slid it across the table, and my stomach turned. Inside were photos, messages, evidence that could destroy us both if it got out. The meeting spiraled downhill from there. Alex was ready for us, and he made it clear he held all the cards. Jason and I left the cafe, our plan in tatters. The ride home was silent, the tension between us palpable. Our once exciting affair had become a source of stress and fear. We needed a new strategy, but neither of us had any ideas. A few days later, Mark reached out unexpectedly, asking to meet. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for reconciliation. We met at a quiet park, the air thick with unspoken words. Mark looked tired, but there was a determination in his eyes. "I hired a private investigator," he revealed. My heart skipped a beat. "I know about Alex. I want to help you get out from under his thumb." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly tempered by Mark's next words. "There are conditions. You need to cut ties with Jason completely and be fully transparent with me from now on." Desperation made the decision for me. I agreed to Mark's terms. I needed his help, and if that meant ending things with Jason, so be it. Together, Mark and I started gathering the evidence we needed to confront Alex legally. It felt strange, working side by side with Mark after everything that had happened, but also oddly comforting. Mark's help was invaluable. We collected documents, recorded conversations, and built a solid case against Alex. The process was grueling, and the constant fear of retaliation loomed over us. But with each piece of evidence, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this nightmare could finally end. The day we handed everything over to our lawyer, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Mark and I had a lot to work through, but this was a start. A chance to rebuild, to move forward. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on the whirlwind of events that had brought me here. The affair, the lies, the threats, it had all led to this moment. And while the future was uncertain, I felt ready to face whatever came next. One step at a time. Nothing says, fresh start, like meeting a lawyer to present evidence against the guy who's been blackmailing you. Mark and I sat across from our attorney, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and an air of authority. She scanned through the stack of documents and recordings we had painstakingly gathered. "This is solid," she finally said, looking up at us. "But you need to proceed carefully. Retaliation is a very real risk." Yeah, no kidding. The thought of Alex's potential backlash was enough to make my skin crawl. But we had come too far to back down now. It was time to end this nightmare once and for all. We set a trap for Alex, arranging another meeting under the guise of compliance. This time, we were prepared. Hidden cameras, witnesses, the whole 9 yards. The tension was palpable as we waited in the bustling cafe. When Alex walked in, that familiar smug expression plastered on his face, I felt a surge of both fear and determination. The confrontation was intense. As we presented the evidence, Alex's confidence wavered. He tried to negotiate, to worm his way out, but we had the upper hand. "You can't do this," he hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. But the presence of our legal advisors and the undeniable proof left him no room to maneuver. Alex's threats turned desperate, but his bravado crumbled in the face of our resolve. The witnesses and legal advisors stood firm, forcing him to back down. It was a risky move, but necessary. We filed a restraining order against Alex and reported his activities to the authorities. The relief was immense, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Meanwhile, Jason began to distance himself. The affair, once a thrilling escape, had become a source of constant stress and danger. I couldn't blame him. The excitement that had once drawn us together now felt like a chain around my neck. Mark and I began the slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. There were setbacks, lots of them, but we were committed to trying. The legal battle with Alex continued, a persistent shadow over our lives. But through it all, Mark's support was unwavering. His dedication gave me hope for the future, a glimmer of light in the darkness. Jason tried to rekindle our affair once, but I shut it down. I needed to focus on repairing my marriage and my life, not chasing after fleeting thrills. With Alex out of the picture, a sense of relief washed over me. The affair had cost me dearly, but it had also brought a harsh clarity to my priorities. Mark and I attended couples therapy, working through the layers of betrayal and hurt. It was a long, difficult road, but we made progress. Slowly but surely, the trust began to rebuild. My relationship with Jason faded into a distant memory. The thrill, the danger, it wasn't worth the destruction it caused. I realized that now. The true value lay in the stability and love I had taken for granted. Finally, in a small, private ceremony, Mark and I renewed our vows. It was a symbolic fresh start, a commitment to each other and to the journey ahead. The road had been tumultuous, full of mistakes and regrets, but we emerged stronger. The affair, the lies, the deceit, it all led us here, to a place of understanding and renewed love. As we stood there, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes, I knew that while the past couldn't be erased, it could be a foundation for something better. And with that, we took our first steps into a future built on hard-earned trust and unwavering commitment.